Hello and welcome to another trip through the history of comics. And we are continuing with our assessment of the early years of WildStorm Productions, the company that was founded by Jim Lee in 1992 and was the first imprints of Image Comics, but was later sold to DC beginning in 1999. We've already covered the early years of WildStorm on two previous episodes. 2 weeks ago, I talked about mostly the launch of WildStorm, focusing on Wildcats, also Gen 13, and a little bit of early Stormwatch and some of the crossovers that were part of the early output of the company. Last week, I talked about Warren Ellis's Stormwatch, which was a game changer for the publisher in terms of quality stories, and opened the door for a new type of stories to be told inside the WildStorm universe. But that was not the only thing that changed in terms of quality at WildStorm at the time. We're talking 1995 to 1997 here, and I think that Jim Lee understood that the material that was being published by Image at the time was not the highest quality it could be in terms of writing and storytelling. At that time, there was a bunch of new imprints that were being used to publish create-your-own material. The most famous, of course, is Vertigo at DC Comics, and Marvel also tried a couple of things on their own. First, they rebranded Epic Comics as the Heavy Hitters line, and they also launched Clive Barker's not Hellraiser, Razor Line universe, which was basically horror superheroes. It was not a proper setting for a creator-owned material. Also, other publishers were in on the game. Malibu had Bravura Comics, and Dark Horse launched Legend about that time. Legend was where Mike Mignola launched Hellboy, and Frank Miller began his series Sin City graphic novels and miniseries. One thing that Image had was that it was already set up for the original creators to own their own stories. But what happened was that many of them began to act like Marvel and DC. They owned the characters, they owned the setting, and other creators were already working on them. So Jim Lee took the opportunity to get some of his professionals and set up the new branding. Now, those comics in the beginning, although they were published by Image, we're talking late 1995 launch, they did not have Image Comics branding at the beginning. And well, I guess that was the name of Jim Lee Studios, but what I think that Lee also maybe thought that he could pay better homage to the history of comics and the search quality and the better stories. And by having his new writers create new stories for that imprint, they could do their own stories without restrictions. The first one was Kurt Busiek. Kurt Busiek in 1995 was already famous. He had already published his Marvels miniseries with Alex Ross, and they got together again to do this. So this is the first Astro City volume, which reprints the original miniseries that was launched just as Homage Comics does not have the Image logo. This was the copy I have here was already published by DC. This is a DC printing after DC had purchased WildStorm. Everything is here for the first 6 issues. Music and Ross came up with the main concept. Music created the setting, the city of Astro City, and Ross created the visuals. It was Brent Anderson, who was known for having in the early 80s, as well as the X-Men graphic novel God Loves Man Kills. That was the main artist. And if you liked superhero comics, you would understand everything that was in here. Although this is a bit, Busiek created this series to showcase the heroes, the human side, and this was part of a new type of comics that looked at the superheroes, but saw them in a positive light instead of the deconstructionist mania that began it with Watchmen and martial law in the 1980s and infected the rest of comics. So it was appropriate that the first issue dealt with a Superman analog. This is Samaritan, and he is the main hero of Astro City. As you can see from the visuals, red and blue, although it's the cape that's blue, and there's also a star motif with sort of connects him with a Captain America patriotic heroes, but also with a DC Starman. He's supposed to be a Superman analog. Even his hair is blue, just as Superman used to be in the beginning. Comics. So if you had to present black, but you didn't want to use everything in black because it was just a smudge. And the highlights were blue because they were the best they could come up with to showcase something as dark. The funny thing is, Superman is trying very hard to be human here. So Samaritan, that is. And what we have here is that he enjoys flying, but he can't. He never flies. He just goes from one place to the other every time there is a catastrophe or that he needs to help with, or a supervillain running amok that he needs to take down. So he never gets to enjoy the best thing about his power, which is flying, and he constantly dreams about it. And he has dreams about it. That's how the story begins, and that's how the story ends. Samaritan gets home, he goes to sleep, and in his dreams, he flies. It's a very human moment because if you could fly but you couldn't enjoy it, I guess you couldn't see the purpose of it. What was the point of flying if you couldn't enjoy it? There's more about civilians on the other stories. Issue number 2 deals with the local Daily Planet, a new hotshot reporter reporting for duty. Work with the Astro City's newspaper. The editor tells him about the story that helped launch him as a journalist, although it's actually a pretty mundane story since he could not prove what he had seen. But there are appearances here by the Silver Agent. This is the Captain America analog, and is part of the same team that Samaritan is in. Throughout the ages, the same team has had new members coming in, but it was always with the same spirit. So you can see them as analogs to both the JSA, the JLA, and the Avengers. The Silver Agent as a dark secret is a shame for Astro City, although at the time they didn't know it. They didn't know that the music hadn't shown this. So this is something that we learn later on, and there will be an entire story arc devoted to the Silver Agent. Issue number 3 sees the sort of Spider-Man, sort of Daredevil, also a bit of the Creeper thrown in. Cracker Jack. No, I mean Jack in the Box. He dresses like a clown, but he doesn't have any powers. And there's a minor criminal who accidentally discovers Jack in the Box's secret identity, and he doesn't know what to do with it. It's not like when the Kingpin found out about Daredevil's identity. Here, the information never reaches the main crime figures in Astro City. So this guy just basically takes off because he's constantly afraid and he doesn't know what to do. Issue number 4 deals with uh, the horror portion of Astro City. The city has space for everything that is related to superhero adventure stories, and so that includes horror. Heroes like Swamp Thing or Doctor Strange, or even series like Tomb of Dracula. They were very popular in the 1970s, and they left their mark in the superhero universes, both at Marvel and DC. So the part of Astro City that dark where the Dark lives, it's called Shadow Hill. Looks like a small European village inside a major metropolitan city in the United States. And it's one person that lives in Shadow Hill but works in the main city. She takes the bus and she travels to the main city. We have the appearance of a few other superheroes in town. This is Shadow Hill's main hero, the Hangman. He makes the occasional appearance. He doesn't talk, he just floats around and protects the citizens of Shadow Hill from vampires and ghouls and whatnot. But there's room for other heroes to appear, even though the the point of view character doesn't really identify with them as she does with her own heroes. This is Winged Victory, the Wonder Woman analog. There's also an appearance here by the first family, the Fantastic Four analogs, but they're not really important to the story here. Issue number 5 is quite interesting. It would have worked very well as it wasn't one of those 1950s science fiction anthologies like Tales of Suspense or or at least yet maybe the Unexpected or what Space Adventure, something like that. I can't remember the DC ones like I remember the Marvel ones. And there's an appearance by Crackerjack. It was modeled after David Hasselhoff. Is the practical joker of the superhero set, more so than Jack in the Box. Jack in the Box looks like a clown, but he's more of a gimmick user and a technical user. There's a bit of an Iron Man component here, but Crackerjack is definitely all bravado and gymnastics and a little bit of strength. No superpowers apparently. And here is being observed by this little man who is compiling files on all of the superheroes. The point of all this is that it's revealed later that he's actually an alien invader, but he's taken quite a liking to life on Earth, on Astro City, and is a fan. He became a fan of all the superheroes, so he starts skimming on the information that he relays back to his own planet. There, even meets Crackerjack again. No, not a very likable hero inside this universe. And finally, part number 6 has another moment. So it's Samaritan and Winged Victory go on a date, and that's something that people fantasize about. Always fantasized about before the modern era, where it's kind of normal for everybody to have a relationship with everybody. But here was the point was to show Superman and Wonder Woman dating, and it would be quite an interesting date. Here they are going to a fancy restaurant, but what they really want is peace and quiet, and the best way to do that is just to go on their secret identities to a burger joint. So all this taking, so they need the opportunity to rest a bit from being superheroes, but of course, ultimately they can't. So it's a bit like Marvels, but music was in this one for the long haul. And after this first six-issue run, music came back for more. Now, there's something that I need to mention here. The first writers to work on Homage Comics, they were all working for WildStorm on several projects. And Busiek was the writer of the Spartan miniseries, a spin-off of Wildcats with their field leader. Astro City then comes back with a what was supposed to be a bi-monthly series, but at the time, Busiek had some health issues and there were constant delays. He claimed at the time that it took him a different thought process to come up with the scripts for Astro City than what he was doing at the time with the Avengers or the Thunderbolts. And he couldn't, his health problems affected his concentration, and that left no time to work properly on the series. So there were constant delays. I remember there was a hero that was introduced in a piece of Wizard magazine's news, and it took Busiek and Ross and Anderson about 5 years to finally get that character in print. The first series to be reprinted, the first issues to be reprinted are from the main series are 1 to 3 and 10 to 13, and here in Family Album. The reason is there was a six-issue storyline between issues 4 and 9, and it's not related to any of the stories here. They're all one-shot stories once again. There's more action with Honor Garlic. This has a bit of Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's havoc with the weather, and nobody knows what's going on. Uh, it involves a fight with the gods. So, as is normal in all these superhero universe, the pagan gods need to make sure they appear because if there are mortals that have the powers of gods, the gods will be jealous, as was normal in several mythologies. The first family finally has an issue devoted to them. This is devoted to the Franklin Richards analog, Astra. They're set up like the Fantastic Four. There's not only the the, the husband and wife, the couple. There's also the kids running around and a couple of uncles. The first family is actually going on their third generation of heroes, like the Fantastic Four, were basically still always the first ones. Putting Astra in regular school so she can interact with regular people. But since for the first 5 years of her life she had no interaction with the outside world, she doesn't even know about normal kid stuff like playing hopscotch, which is something that she devotes herself to learning in this story. There's another first family story and deals with this thing. Analog is actually a prince from a race of humanoids, of mutated humanoids from the depths of the ocean, and he takes a liking to one of the members of the first family, and they are already married here. So another story here, which deals with one of those bad supervillains that has a wishes to take his revenge on all the heroes that beat him in the past. And this is sort of a analog to the Tinkerer, or maybe Clock King. I think read Marvel and Clock King at DC. Sorry if you can't see this very well. This page is a bit dark. He's a master thief, and the irony here is that as he finally succeeds in showing them all that he can be as good as everybody else, it's just that in order to pull it off, nobody can know. Otherwise, he won't pull it off. That goes to the theory that was running around regarding Silver Age stories, was that many times the motivation of the supervillains to keep coming back was not that they were looking for money. They weren't really looking to take over the world. They were just motivated by revenge against the hero that they thought that had wronged them somehow. There's another issue focusing on Jack in the Box. He became quite popular at the time. I think they made an action figure of him. It deals with time travel. There's Jack in the Boxes from the future. Also a regular trope in superhero comics. Your evil twin from the dimension, from another dimension, and from the future simultaneously. This is the whole arc. Now it is okay. Now this is Looney Leo, a living cartoon. A bit of a homage to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who was the 1989 film where cartoons interacted with regular humans. A whole film devoted to that, having cartoons and regular people on the same scene. Goes back to the 1950s. There's a scene with Jim Kelly dancing with Tom and Jerry. He's also kind of like the lion from the Metro Goldwyn Mayer movies. Becomes a He becomes a star before this story, and eventually fades away, and he can't deal with it. A bit like Sinatra in his final years. The third volume is called Confession, and it's the first ongoing storyline at Astro City, and it deals with a sort of it's a Batman and Robin analog, and it's sort of but it has the Robin character as the point of view. He's in his late teens and he wants to become a superhero. So he begins with a sidekick. There's an academy for that and everything. So he joins up with the Confessor, who is a vigilante that hunts members of the underworld at night. The the Confessor has a secret. He used to be a priest, that's why he has the religious motif. And his sidekick is called Altar Boy. There's a bit of interaction here. Another one here. And the idea is that the confessor is a vampire, and the altar boy figures it out. It's something that the underworld at large believes to be true, although they're not really sure if it is true. And we have visitors. Hello, Rez. Great to see you here. So as you can see, I'm talking about WildStorm once again, but I have decided to showcase Homage Comics. I mostly have the Astro City comics. I don't have very much stuff, but I'll be able to talk a little bit about all the stuff that was published in the early years. Eventually, you see the Confessor dying and the Alter Web becoming the new Confessor, but since and people trying to ward him off, thinking that he's a vampire, but although by the end he's not. So there were a couple of other stories that were published at Homage that those years, and I don't have those stories. Uh, I'd like to have them because one of those was Leave It to Chance, and it is very beautiful artwork by Paul Smith, who was illustrating it for James Robinson. Robinson at the time was writing Wildcats for WildStorm. That's why he was in line to have a Homage Comics property. Paul Smith is one of those cool guys that could have been somebody much greater, much bigger in the industry. He worked on the X-Men, but he just did not have the discipline to stay focused on his work. I think I remember an interview where he says that on X-Men, he bought a motorcycle and just took off for a year. I'll see if I can locate some artwork for you to see from Leave It to Chance. It's the story of Chance, 11-year-old girl, and their pet dragon. Let's see now. This will do next, I guess. It's a bit small. Let's see if I can screen share. Okay, yeah, this is it. This is from Leave It to Chance. It was a bit of a fantasy story. Here's the cover to an issue. This is pretty good, and I'm not sure if it's still in print. I'd love to get this now. I didn't buy it at the time, and I would love to take a chance at this. I always enjoyed Robinson's writing, and Paul Smith's art was always amazing. Here's another cover. This was pretty good. Another series that was pretty much forgotten, Damned, a miniseries by Stephen Grant, and Mike Zeck, who created the first Punisher miniseries in 1985, or in 1986. But that series, the new series Damned, did not really make it on many people's radars. It's a bit of a crime noir series. See if I can locate it again. There it is. Screen share again. Yeah, this is from that series. Not typical Mike Zeck. It's, if you remember Mike Zeck from the 1980s with Captain America and the Punisher, it's a bit different. As you can see here. And there was something else that I've read, but I don't own. A friend of mine does. With Kurt Busiek and David Wenzel created Wizard's Tale. Beautiful graphic novel. See if I can show it. There it is. Larger pictures. Here it is. share it again. Here it is, The Wizard's Tale, Kurt Busiek and David Wenzel. Not the typical fare that was being published through Image Comics at the time, which makes Homage Comics a more interesting prospect. Here's another piece of artwork. Very good, as you can see. Mine has this. So okay. So finally, there was also another series that I don't own, and probably I don't think it was very good. It was a bit of demonic cheesecake. It was called Dark Child. I can't remember the author. It was never very interested very much. That helped launch the career of a writer and artist. Jeff Mariotti and John Cassaday worked on this Weird West series called Desperadoes. Mariotti was writing Wildcat's Adventures at the time. He was not very well known. He's better known now for having been the writer of the Angel comic adaptation based on the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off, Angel. And I think this was the first Western-themed story ever to be published at Image. And this is what helped launch John Cassaday's career. He had already worked for Marvel, but not on anything really big. And this was before Planetary. His style is recognizable here, even if he evolved throughout this series. Some movements are a bit stiff, but the storytelling is all there. Cassaday was already very good at this time. So this is a basic Weird West story, but it's interesting, it's engaging, and I enjoyed it very much. I have also the second miniseries, which has artwork by John Severin, but I'm not showing it because it was already at the DC period, so I'm sticking with the early years here. This is pretty good. This has been reprinted by IDW, and who has produced new Desperados material with Mariotti writing. I think they've republished, I'm not sure, somebody republished The Wizard's Tale, and Stephen Grant's Damned was reprinted by Boom Studios, who actually got more sales out of it. I didn't buy it at the time, although that time I'm pretty sure that I saw the ad. Unfortunately, I didn't buy it. Stephen Grant was a case of another writer who was working for WildStorm. He was writing Wetworks, and that's how he got the chance to do Homage Comics. There were this imprint continued after WildStorm was bought by DC, but it kind of lost traction since the main title, Astro City, was plagued with delays, unfortunately, and took a while for them to pick back up. There were a couple of series by Warren Ellis, although by that time they were focusing on a new imprint called Cliffhanger, which is Scott Campbell and Joe Madureira, and Homage kind of fizzled out, and until it was replaced by WildStorm's signature series. Still, it serves as it serves to show that even in 1995, even inside Image Comics, WildStorm was already looking for more variety and better quality, and I think this series gave it to us. They could show they showed that at the time that the Image brand did not have to mean cyborgs with big guns and explosions and female heroes with large breasts. There was room for a lot of good stuff, and it finally came out. And that's why right now Image as is known as the publisher with the best overall quality among all of its series. They can thank the Homage Comics line for it. So this is the this is it for this part of the history of WildStorm, and we're going to be back to more regular WildStorm stories. I want to cover the rest of War Analysis material, so I'll either be focusing on the Authority or Planetary. I'll probably do Planetary first, so I can showcase the Authority, followed by a couple of spin-offs that were launched around the same time that were not made by Alice, but I think it's important to talk about them. After that, I'll probably close the series with Joe Casey's Wildcats. But for now, this is it. This was Homage Comics, very interesting line at the time that WildStorm put out, and we will be back with that we will be back with more WildStorm next week. So as promised, I will probably do Planetary, which is another like Astro City is another exploration on what comic book superheroes are and about the origins of superheroes and all of its related adventure type stories that led into their creation. So that's it for today. I want to thank you for watching, Res. You're the only one here, I think. But the video is online, and so thank you once again for taking the time to watch it. If you're interested in the history of comics, that's what I will be. That's what will always be my focus. And if you want to learn a bit more about the history of comics from my perspective, please like and subscribe. I could use a few more subscribers. And well, that's it. I'll be back next week, and keep reading old comics.